He's a convert to the Catholic faith, a brilliant scholar with a PhD in philosophy. He's taught at a number of universities. He's developed numerous video courses in the areas of logic and theology, the philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas, and the importance of teaching children how to intellectually defend their faith. He's a brilliant man. Now, 10 or 15 years ago, this same man was known as Scott Bam Bam Sullivan, the U.S. heavyweight kickboxing champion. I went online and I saw him just kicking the heck out of guys on video on YouTube. Unbelievable. He runs the Bam Bam Martial Arts Studio in Houston, Texas. He's the founder and chief instructor there. So he's a man of brains and brawn and also of family. He's the father of 8 children, which he and his wife, Brandy, the love of his life, homeschool in a small log cabin deep in the woods of Texas. Can you believe this, guys? A true Renaissance man. He's come in from the state of Texas to be with us today. Please, a rousing St. Louis welcome for Dr. Scott Sullivan.
Man, I don't know if I can live up to that. All right. Man, that was amazing. I don't know if I can live up to that. How many people here have heard of the book, The God Delusion by atheist Richard Dawkins? It's hard for me to see out there. I see some people. You've heard of the book. Anybody read that book? No, a few. Yeah, that's not the kind of book that people, in these circles typically read. However, you should know that it is a New York Times bestseller. And of course, the point of the book is to show that atheism is true, that God does not exist, that, of course, belief in God is a delusion. And even though, y'all don't read this book, a lot of people do, and it can have a big impact on our culture. Let me give you just one example. A good friend of mine is a professor of theology at the Franciscan University of Steubenville. Never heard of that place? Well, okay, right. Good Catholic school, right? Well, he told me about a time there when there were 3 students there at that university, 3 Catholic young ladies there studying, and they got together one night and they were just kind of talking, and they got to talking about this book by Richard Dawkins, The God Delusion. And 2 of them decided, you know what, that'd be kind of a fun thing to do, right? Let's just kind of read this book, go through it and show how silly this atheism is. We can expose his arguments, debunk all him, and just kind of make short work of this guy. That would just be a fun thing to do. So that's what they did. They went to read the book. However, that's not what happened. What happened was that by the time these girls got to the end of the book, they became convinced of the atheist arguments. They became atheists. And then they went back to the third girl and, kind of teased her as to why she believes in all that silly Catholic stuff, you see. So this is just one example of what's going on in our culture. And I have some very troublesome stats here. This is from the Center for Applied Research into the Apostolate, written in the year 2014. So it covers a 14-year time span. And it says that since the year 2000, 14 million Catholics have left the faith. Infant baptism has dropped by 28%. Adult baptism has dropped by 31%. And sacramental Catholic marriages have dropped by a whopping 41%. And that for every person that joins the church on Easter, 4 more leave. So you got a net loss of 3, right? So I think it's safe to say that we are living in an age of mass apostasy. It's important to realize that we live in a post-Christian culture. It's a culture that once adopted Christianity but has now, just moved on. It's kind of like been there, done that. And so there's a lot of hostility today, both intellectually and morally speaking, against belief in God and the Catholic Church. Now, there are, of course, a lot of factors for this, both inside and outside the church. But the one I want to focus on here is just one fundamental problem that I think, honestly, a lot of people miss, okay? And the fundamental problem is this, that most people in the world do not think Catholicism is true. All right, let me say that again. Most people in the world do not think Catholicism is true, right? Like Muslims, atheists, whatever. If they thought it were true, they would be Catholic, but of course they don't. They're not. So, in other words, there is a huge intellectual front to the culture war. There's an intellectual front to evangelization. There's an intellectual front to discipleship. It's not just a moral battle. It's not just a spiritual battle. It's an intellectual battle. It's a battle of ideas. It's a battle about truth. It's a battle about, whose worldview is true. And that's what I want to talk about. Because I think that what every Catholic needs to know about their faith is that there are good reasons for thinking that it's true. And this topic is especially close to my heart, and just let me tell you why. I was raised in a loving Christian home. I was brought up evangelical Protestant. We were into Billy Graham. I was born again and went to church every Sunday, saved, all that stuff. And then as I got into high school, senior, started to be a freshman in college, I fell away. Like a lot of people, I fell away from the Christian faith entirely. I became an agnostic. And if you don't know what that means someone who's not sure that God exists or not. Not quite an atheist, see. And so I was an agnostic. And I became an agnostic not primarily because I was this huge sinner, but of course I was that. But I became an agnostic because I didn't think Christianity was true. I had never been given any reasons to think that it's true. Honestly, I thought it was like a Santa Claus for grown-ups. And so I was agnostic, and I went off to college that way. And I did become a professional kickboxer, which, by the way, does not pay very much money at all. And so I had to supplement that income by being a bouncer on weekends. I mean, what else is a kickboxer going to do? So that's what I did. And I remember one night, and this is kind of a weird story, but it's true. I was sitting there bouncing one night, and I just felt this need to intellectually justify my agnosticism. I wanted to intellectually justify why I had left the Christian faith. And so I got up. I was sitting on this bench by the front door where we check IDs. I got up and I went to the bartender. I said, give me one of those tablets, those pads of paper that they write drinks on. And I sat down and, I just started writing. So you got music blaring, lights blaring. I'm sitting down there writing all my objections to Christianity. And I thought I was smart. I thought, man, no one's ever thought of this stuff before. This is awesome. This is irrefutable. This is unique. This is the definitive refutation of Christianity written right now here in this bar. It turns out I found out later that my arguments were not unique and were not very good and were in fact already debunked by the early church fathers, but that's a different story. Anyway, it came time to graduate. I was kind of on this 10-year plan in college. I couldn't make up my mind, I changed my major many times. I managed to amass enough credit hours to get a BA in history, so that's what I did. And so I thought, all right, well, I got to kind of get on with my life now. I got to grow up. What am I going to do? And so that made me wonder, okay, well, what if I'm going to kind of move on with my life? What's the purpose of life anyway? You see what I'm saying? So this event of graduating from university sparked a philosophical question about the meaning of life. I have to go up and get on with my life. What should I do? Well, what's the meaning of life? You see the connection there. And so that philosophical question, what is the meaning of life, caused me to start to investigate religion again. But I wasn't going to do it because it made me feel good. I didn't want a placebo. I wanted to be intellectually honest. I wanted the truth. So I started researching different things. And this is a whole long story crammed in just a couple minutes here, of course. There's a lot more to tell. But at one point, I'll never forget this. I went to a Barnes & Noble bookstore, and I went into the religion section in Barnes & Noble. Has anybody ever been to the religion section in Barnes & Noble? Man, there is some crazy stuff in the religion section. I'm talking about crystal, a lot of new age crystals, talking to porpoises, stuff like that. And so, by God's grace, I just walked up to this shelf, and I just looking, and I just saw this book with a blue spine, so I pulled it off the shelf. It was called A Handbook of Christian Apologetics by Peter Kraft and Father Ronald DeShelley. Write that title down. A Handbook of Christian Apologetics. I think they got a second version now called A Handbook of Catholic Apologetics, but still pretty much the same. Anyway, I pulled this book off. It was like $13. I thought, man, I'll buy this. So I bought it, took it home. I was blown away by this book. I was amazed. This book changed my life. I'm going through this. What are you talking? Philosophical arguments for the existence of God. We can know that God exists through reason, apart from faith. I'd never heard that. Historical arguments for the divinity of Jesus Christ and the reliability of the Gospels. I never heard that. So we can know that God exists. We can know that Christianity is true. This book changed my life. I became a Christian at that point. And to be honest with you, I was kind of ticked off because I had never been taught that stuff before. In all my years of Christian upbringing, Sunday school, artwork, coloring pictures and stuff on Sunday morning, as a kid, all that stuff, I had never been given the intellectual foundations for my faith. And I felt honestly ripped off. And I felt like if I had been given that stuff, I never would have left Christianity in the first place. You see? So anyway, it was at that point that I decided to devote my life to helping people like me. I knew there had to be other people out there in the world like me, that is, people who would be Christian, who would be Catholic, if they knew there were good reasons to do so. I'm talking about intellectual ones especially. So that's what I decided to do. I decided to devote my life to this cause, to helping other people see the rationality of belief in God and the Catholic faith, and that's what I do. All right. Here's why this is important for you. Here's why this is important for you. How many people here have kids? All right, God, I got 8 of them. I know it. I got kids too. Okay. How many here want your kids to keep their faith after they leave your care? After they leave your governance, you want them to stay Catholic? Of course. What could be more important than that? I think the same way. That's the most important mission to me in life as a parent. That's our hope. But here's the reality. Sometimes truth hurts. The reality is that your kids will probably lose their faith. That's at least what the stats say, and the numbers don't lie. So maybe we want to ask why. Why does this happen? Just kind of follow me here for a second. Take your typical 19-year-old Christian girl, right? She's 19 years old, raised Catholic all her life, a virtuous young lady. Her will's been formed. Her moral formation is sound. Man, this girl's a good kid. She desires the true good. But now it's time to go off to college, right? And there she begins to encounter various moral temptations. Temptations which she's never had to deal with before. Temptations that go against her upbringing as a Christian. Temptations that are enticing not only in themselves, but also because, all the cool social benefits you'll get. You'll be cool, you'll fit in, you'll be liked if you do these things. And like any temptation, the temptations are attractive in some sense. They seem good. Part of her wants to engage in them. She wants to fit in. She wants to be liked. She wants to have fun, okay? But her faith has taught her that these things are wrong, that she should not do them, you see? So this kind of inner struggle intensifies. She reasons, even though I'm enticed to doing X, whatever sin X is, I feel pulled to doing X. She reasons that I cannot do X because my faith says X is wrong. My faith says I should not do that thing. But now comes another kind of challenge. She's told by impressive-sounding science professors that human origins can be completely explained by a process of genetic mutation and natural selection. She's told by her liberal arts teachers things like all truth is relative, that Christians are bigots and did horrible things in history, and that the Bible is just full of myths, stories, and contradictions. So she kind of starts to feel embarrassed about telling her friends she's Catholic. She begins now to doubt her faith. So you see the problem here? That one thing that was keeping her from acting on those temptations, her faith, is now eroding. She wonders, how do I even know my faith is true? And if it's not true, then why can't I go out and do all these fun things? She goes to her mom for help. Mom doesn't have any answers. She goes to her pastor for help. The pastor tells her just to have faith. But she knows that's what all religious people say, right? Have faith. She wants to know why she should have this faith rather than some other faith, or maybe no faith at all. And the people she trusts the most cannot give her an answer. So this poor girl, right, this poor Christian girl has been naively sent off to the front lines of a war, the culture war. She is untrained, she is ill-equipped, and she is exposed and vulnerable to all these moral and intellectual challenges against her faith. So, what do you think she's going to do now? Well, did you know that a number of surveys have shown that 60 to 90% of Christian kids lose their faith in high school or college? And I know there are a number of reasons for this, but like I said, a principal reason is because these kids have not been properly trained on how to deal with the intellectual challenges against their faith. This girl had a good moral formation. She had her catechism classes. Her will was oriented towards the good, and as far as that goes, she was okay. But as St. Thomas Aquinas taught, the will has to work in cooperation with the intellect. In other words, if the intellect falls, the will's going to fall too. She can't handle these intellectual challenges to her faith, okay? So dare we say it? Let's be honest. Her Catholic parents have done her a disservice. Her Catholic community has done her a disservice. In all of her years of Christian upbringing, Catholic upbringing, she's never been given any reason to think that any of this stuff is true. She was never trained in what was classically called the Demonstratio Christiana, the science that shows that Jesus Christ claimed and proved himself to be a divine messenger sent by God to teach a doctrine of salvation that is obligatory on all men. That is a science better known today as Christian apologetics. Her education just didn't cover these things. She learned math, she learned history, maybe she learned Latin, learned how to play the violin. And now she's walking out the door. So now she's starting to grow up thinking that Christianity is just a Santa Claus for grown-ups. And if you think that I'm just making all this stuff up, I have proof. National Catholic Register, back in September. You can Google this later if you want. Catholics are leaving the faith by age 10, so what can parents do about it? Researcher Mark Gray at the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate stated that the whole concept of faith is losing credibility in the young who do not see God or religion as compatible with science. I got to read some parts of this to you. Young Catholics are leaving the faith at an early age, sometimes before the age of 10, and their reasons are deeper than just being bored at Mass, according to the author of a new report. Those that are leaving for no religion, and a pretty big component of them saying they are either atheist or agnostic, it turns out that when you probe a little bit more deeply and you allow them to talk in their own words, they're bringing up things that are related to science and a need for evidence and a need for proof, said Dr. Mark Gray, a senior research associate at the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate at Georgetown University. It's almost a crisis in faith, he said. In the whole concept of faith, this is a generation that is struggling with faith in ways we haven't seen in previous generations. In exploring why young Catholics were choosing to leave the faith, he noted, quote, an emerging profile of youth who say they find the faith incompatible with what they are learning in high school or at the university level. In a perceived battle between the Catholic Church and science, the Church is losing. And it's losing Catholics at a young age. The interviews with youth and young adults who had left the Catholic faith revealed that the typical age for this decision was 13. And of those who had left the faith, only 13% said they were ever likely to come back. And absent any big changes in their life, they're probably not. Here's the very relevant part for our discussion here. The most common reason given for leaving the Catholic faith was that they stopped believing in God or religion entirely. This was evidence of a desire among some of them for proof, for evidence of what they're learning about their religion and about God, Gray said. It is a trend in the popular culture to see atheism as smart and faith as a fairy tale, he said. And so, my purpose today is just to kind of get across to you guys one point, one simple point. As Catholics, we absolutely must teach ourselves and the next generation the intellectual foundations for our faith. To paraphrase the great Christian thinker of the 20th century, Francis Schaeffer, if this generation doesn't give answers, the next generation is going to think there aren't any. You see, most Catholics have absolutely no idea what to say when someone asks them, why do you believe in Jesus at all? Why believe in Jesus rather than something else? Why faith in Jesus? Why not faith in Islam or the tooth fairy? What makes your faith any different from theirs? And Catholics ought to have a good answer to that question. It's the conversation going on in academic culture today. But the problem is that the answer Catholics usually give to that question are, in fact, very bad. Bad answer number one, well, that's just what my parents taught me. And that answer is appropriate when you're 5, but it's not okay when you're 25. Bad answer number two, well, I just believe on blind faith. Well, so does everybody else and all the other different religions too. What makes your blind faith any better than their blind faith? Bad answer number three, well, my faith is just based on some strong feelings I have, a strong sentiment. Christians aren't the only ones with the strong feelings or sentiments, right? A lot of people have strong feelings and sentiments about their religion. That doesn't make them true. Feeling is not knowledge. Sentiment is not knowledge. We need something more than that. And what makes this so sad is that there are, in fact, good answers to this question. You see, traditionally, Christianity has had a very strong intellectual tradition. I think Catholicism is the most well thought out and rational worldview on the planet. But too many Christians today, too many Catholics today have forgotten this. Too many Catholics today have adopted a warped and distorted blind faith anti-intellectual, counterfeit form of Christianity that is better known as the heresy of fideism. And if you want to know what fideism is, you can look at the documents of the Vatican Council I. But the short answer is that fideism can be better characterized as blind faith Christianity, or more simply, Santa Claus for grown-ups. The true Christian position, the Catholic position on this, is that God has acted in human history, and in so doing has left traces of his activity, traces that are open to rational investigation and argument. In other words, from all the different religions in the world, okay, human reason can determine which one of those religions is true. And this is because God has stamped his revelation with certain identifying marks so that the true revelation from God can be distinguished from all the false claims made by charlatans and phonies. And people need to know this. Catholics need to know this. Catholics today cannot afford to be ignorant of these things anymore. We're talking about the battle for souls here. People need to be shown today that it's possible for intelligent, well-educated people to rationally accept Christian belief. You see, reason and evidence are the strong points of Christianity. It's foolish to kind of just throw these weapons aside in today's culture war. So, let me give you 3 reasons why you and your loved ones, kids, everything, should become well-versed in Christian and Catholic apologetics. Number 1, of course, many of you know, Scripture commands it. 1 Peter 3:15, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that is in you. Scripture says so. Number 2, apologetics can strengthen the faith of believers. The faith just becomes more deeply rooted in the person who knows the reasons, who knows the intellectual foundation for their faith. And I will have to tell you that if you insist strictly on an emotion-based faith, you are shortchanging yourself out of the incredibly rich intellectual side of the Catholic tradition. There's a whole history there. Number 3, apologetics, apologetics can help unbelievers come to the faith by removing intellectual obstacles. People say arguments never brought anyone to the faith. False. Not true at all. Happens all the time. There aren't just moral obstacles to the faith. There are those. People don't come to the faith because they don't want to give up their sin. That happens, okay? But there are also intellectual obstacles to the faith. Read St. Augustine's Confessions. He couldn't believe there's such a thing as a person without a body, right? Arguments brought St. Augustine to the faith. I mean, he had obviously a moral issue too, but once the intellectual was removed, the moral fell right behind it, you see. And my point is that sin is not the only reason why people don't become Catholic, okay? A lot of people don't become Catholic because they don't think it's true, like I said at the beginning. I've got a friend of mine. She's I guess you'd call her an agnostic atheist, and she's a PhD in microbiology. And she told me, Scott, you know what? I've asked Christian people why they believe what they do. She said, I'm an educated person. I kind of consider myself educated, with doctorate in microbiology. And I often ask Christians why they believe what they do, and they never have an answer. Sad. I think that if you're unable to give an answer to someone, then you do a disservice to those who come to you with questions. Christianity is a viable option for thinking people, and we need to be able to show them that. And so I just want to strongly, if you haven't done this in the past, it's all right. Today's a new day. Start over. Start now. I want to strongly encourage all Catholics, my brothers here, everyone, to learn the arguments by which your faith is defended. You have to take positive action. It's going to take work, okay? It just does. You got to educate yourself and your children in the science of apologetics. And for Catholics, that means education on all three levels of apologetics. Let me explain to you what I mean by that, because when you're talking to Catholics and you say the word apologetics, they think dialoguing with Protestants about where is Mary in the Bible. Okay? Not that that's not important, but I'm telling you, that's not really where the main conversation is at nowadays. That was okay back in the 40s and 50s when pretty much everybody was kind of Christian of some kind. Not anymore. But let me back up for a second. Three levels of Catholic apologetics. The most foundational and most important, the logically prior, fundamental issue regarding apologetics is the existence of God. Does God exist or not? The Catholic Church, this is a doctrine of the Catholic Church that says, read the documents of Vatican I, human reason apart from faith can demonstrate that God exists. So this is the first level of apologetics, the existence of God. Demonstratio religiosa, the science that shows that there is God, a first cause, a designer of the universe, a ground for moral obligation. Because if you don't have the existence of God, if you don't know that God exists, then you can forget all religious discussion. You don't have to worry about where is Mary in the Bible if you don't even know God exists or not. You see what I'm saying? That's the most fundamental level of Catholic apologetics. This is how the method has been traditionally taught. Demonstratio religiosa first, the existence of God. Philosophy can show, human reason apart from faith can show that God exists. That gets you to a certain level, right? Okay, fine. God exists. Atheism's false. Agnosticism is no good. But we're not done. And the reason why is because just because we know God exists, the next logical question is, okay, well, which God are we talking about? Are we talking about Islam, Hinduism, Zeus, Thor, you know? Which God are we talking about? Who is that God that we learned about last semester in philosophy class? That brings us to the next, second level of Catholic apologetics, which answers the question that Christ is that God, that Christ is the definitive revelation of that God that we learned about in philosophy class. You can put a face on that God now. You see what I'm saying? So we know God exists, number one. Secondly, we know that Christ is that God. Making a lot of progress here. But we're not done, because now we know Christianity of some sort is true, right? But the next logical question is, okay, which version of Christianity has the true teachings of Jesus Christ? Because there are so many contradictory, competing alternatives out there, right? You got the First Baptist Church, Second Baptist Church, the House of Bread and Hope. You know, I can't keep up with those, right? So we want to know, okay, if God exists, Christ is God, which version of Christianity is true? That brings us to the third level of Catholic apologetics proper, you might say, where we show that the Catholic Church has the authority, let's say, to interpret Christ's teaching. You see what I mean? It's called the Demonstratio Catholica. So we need today to be well-versed in all three of those levels. And I would suggest to you that those, if you can follow me, those first two levels that I mentioned, the existence of God and the divinity of Jesus Christ, are most important today. That's where the intellectual conversation is at today. I suspect if you came here to this university and you start talking about this stuff in class, they're not going to be arguing in class about where is Mary in the Bible. They're going to be saying, hey, I read that guy Richard Dawkins and, you know, blah, blah, blah. You see what I'm saying? So it's important to understand that Catholic apologetics is much broader than dialoguing with Protestants. That's at the end. You got some more fundamental issues that come before that. And that's where, like I said, the intellectual conversation is at. Anyway, we got to do this stuff, okay? It's going to take some work. I'm a dad. Many of you are dads out there. We got to do this stuff. We got to be different in some sense, right? If you do what most parents do, then it just makes sense that you're going to get what most parents get. Kids walking out the door of the church. So I hope to Hope I can at least suggest to you that faith is a treasure that is worth investing some time into. And today that means learning how to intelligently discuss it with unbelievers. Make no mistake about it. Like I said before, this is a time of intellectual clash between opposing worldviews. And as a Catholic dad, for heaven's sakes, who's the head of your home, we have a duty to prepare ourselves and our kids for this battle. This is one battle you can't afford to lose. I can't afford to lose. It's the worst thing ever. The stakes are high. So please take some time to invest in these important things and defend what you love. Train your mind for Christ's sake, okay? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome.